Morning. Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. Who is greater, Pete Rose or Tony Gwynn? If you just look at the stats, Pete Rose played 24 years, Tony Gwynn 20. And if you look at career average, runs scored, RBIs, home runs, triples, doubles, singles, total bases, slugging on base, games, at bats, stolen bases, walks, strikeouts, 100 RBI seasons, runs scored, most RBIs scored, or most RBIs in one season, career hits, 300 batting seasons, highest average, years played, 200 hit seasons, highest hits in a season, most multi-hit games, and batting titles. If you look at all of that, Pete Rose wins 13-10 in categories because he had more at bats and more games played than Tony Gwynn. What I want to do is, who is greater? How do we determine who's the better ball player? One way to do it is to have both players have the same number at bats. And according to what they produced in their careers, their averages, batting average, runs scored average, how many runs per game did they average in their career? Same with RBIs, total bases, hits. Pete Rose had 14,053 at-bats. Tony Gwynn had 9,288. That's a difference of 4,765 more at-bats for Pete Rose than Tony Gwynn. Rose played 3,562 games. Woo. Gwynn played 2,440. That's a difference of 1,122 games. Let's presuppose and let's do a what if. Not to knock down any one player over the other, but just to say, hey, what if they had the same number of bats? What would the stats bear out? Pete Rose, career batting average, 303. Gwynn, 338. 1-0 Gwynn. Runs scored. Pete Rose scored 2,165 runs. Gwynn, 1,383. But if we determine how many runs per game did Gwynn average? He averaged .506 runs scored per game. About half. Because if he scored one run a game, he would have over 2,440 because that's how many games he played, but he didn't. He did .50, so he has 1,383, about half. What if we multiplied that .506 by 1,122 more games? That would come out to 359 more runs. So add the 1,383 plus 359 and give him 1,742. That would have been his projected total if he had 1,122 more games. So he still falls short of Rose because Rose is at 2,165. Rose wins the category 1-1. RBIs. Rose had 1,314. Gwynn, 1,138. Do the same scenario. Gwynn averaged about .46 RBIs per game, about half. So if we multiply that by 1,122 games, .46, that comes up to 394 more runs if Tony Gwynn has 1,122 more games, matching the total that Pete Rose played. Add that to the 1,138 and 394 projected. Give him 1,532. That would have been more RBIs than Pete Rose. 2-1, Gwynn. He wins the RBIs. How about home runs? Rose had 160. Gwynn 135. Gwynn averaged about .055 home runs per game. He would have a projected total, multiply that by 1122 more games. He would have hit 47 more home runs in those 1122 extra games. I would have gave him 182. He wins because he beats Rose at 160. So far, we have Gwynn 3, Pete Rose 1. Because Gwynn wins batting average, he wins RBIs, and he wins home runs. How about triples? Rose had 135 his career, Gwynn 85. Look to see how many triples he averaged, not that many. So he wouldn't have caught Rose in triples. So we'll give it to Rose in triples winning the category. 3-2 Gwynn. Doubles. Rose had 746. Gwynn 543. Again, do the average. Gwynn doesn't catch him in doubles. So it's 3-3. Singles. Rose had 3,215 singles. Gwynn 2378. Even with 1,122 more games, he doesn't catch Rose. So it's 4-3 Rose. Total bases. Pete Rose had 5,752. Gwynn 4,259. So per game, Gwynn averaged about 1.74 base per game. So multiply that by 1,122 more games. Gwynn comes out with 5,751 if you add the projected total. Rose has 57.52. Gwynn 57.51. One base. Rose wins it. 5-3 Rose. Slugging. Rose 409. Gwynn 459. Gwynn wins it. 5-4 Rose. On base. Rose 375. Gwynn 388. Gwynn wins it. 5-5. Games played. Okay, they both play the same number of games. At bats, same number of bats. Stolen bases. Rose 198. Gwynn 319. 6-5 Gwynn. Walks. Rose walked more. He had 1,506. Gwynn 790. Gwynn swung the bat. He's not going to walk. Rose wins it. 6-5. Rose. Strikeouts. Rose 1,143. Gwynn only 434. Gwynn wins it. 7-6 Gwynn. 100 RBI seasons. Rose did not have one. Gwynn had one. 8-6 Gwynn. Most runs in a season. Scored. Rose had 130. Gwynn 119. Give it to Rose. 8-7 Gwynn. RBIs. The most for Rose was 82. Gwynn had 119 one year. 9-7 Gwynn. Hits. This is interesting. Rose had 4,256 hits. Gwynn 3,141. That's a difference of about 1,015. Rose had 1,000 more hits than Gwynn. But if Gwynn plays 1,122 more games, Gwynn averaged 1.28 hits per game for his career. Multiply that, he gets another 1,437 hits. Look at this. 3,141 plus another 1,437 projected gives him 4,578 hits. If Tony Gwynn and Pete Rose, if Tony Gwynn had the same number at bats as Pete Rose, he would have had 4,578 hits. Forget the injury factor. Forget all that. We just assume they're healthy through all their career, okay? Rose had 4,256, but Gwynn's projected total with the same number of bats as Pete Rose would have had 4,578. Is that number one all time? No. Because there's a guy, you see this book? Baseball is a numbers game. I wrote it. It's on Amazon. That's not number one all time because, according to my analysis, there was a player called Ed Delante. He played 1,837 games and had 2,597 hits. He was averaging 1.41 hits per game. Gwynn, he was at 1.28. So what I did was, if Delante plays the same number of games as Pete Rose, he would have ended up with 5,029 hits. Ed Delante, he was a good hitter. That was projected. That's presupposed. You know who's number two? Sam Thompson. 1,410 games, and he gets 1,988 hits. That's like 1.41 hits per game. He would have had 5,022 hits. So Ed Delante and Sam Thompson are right up there. Ty Cobb would have been number three because he averaged 1.38 hits per game. Then you got Willie Keeler, Jesse Burkett, Dan Brothers, George Susser, Cap Hansen. All these guys had really good averages of hits per game. Where did Pete Rose end up on this list? Where is Pete Rose? He's way, there he is, number 49. 49 other players had better averages of hits per game than Pete Rose, because Pete averaged 1.19 hits per games played. So I just thought of a little trivia there. So when I did the projected on Tony Gwynn, he was at 1.28 hits per game. So he wins it 10-7 Gwynn. 300 batting seasons. Rose had 16, Gwynn 19. Give it to Gwynn, 11-7. Highest average in a season. Highest for Pete was 348. Gwynn 394, but that was in August. They had the strike that year. But I still believe that Gwynn would have been about 390, maybe tapered off to 385 or 380 if he, in the latter part of August and September, he tails off. But we don't know. He may have gotten even hotter, because the more you play baseball, the better you get at it, really. If you're batting every day, Gwynn could have been over 400 that season. I wished he would have. Oh, man. But Gwynn wins the highest batting average, 12-7. 200 hit season. Pete Rose had 10 of them. Gwynn only had 5. So give it to Rose, 12-8. Highest hits in a season. Pete had 230 one year. Gwynn 220. Give it to Rose, 12-9. Multi-hit games. Rose had 1,225 multi-hit games. How many did Gwynn have? 951. Give it to Rose, it's 12-10. And the last category, batting titles. Rose had 3, Gwynn 8. Final score in categories. Gwynn 13, Pete Rose 10. Is Gwynn a greater player than Pete Rose? I don't know. Gwynn won in batting average, projected RBIs, projected home runs, on base, slugging, stolen bases, fewer strikeouts. He had 100 RBI season. He had the most RBIs in a season over Rose. He had 19 300 batting seasons. He had a highest batting average, 394. And he had 8 batting titles. Rose wins in runs scored, triples, doubles, singles, total bases, walks, most runs in a season, most 200 hit seasons, highest hit total in a season, and most multi hit games. Wow, who would you take? Pete Rose or Tony Gwynn? I like Gwynn because of his 338 batting average to Rose's 303. But Rose scored more runs. Even though Gwynn had a better on base percentage, Rose had more triples, doubles, and singles. So he's making contact. Rose struck out more than Gwynn, but he had more total bases. And he had more 200 hit seasons because he's playing every day. And he has more multi hit games. I didn't project out total. If Gwynn plays 1,220, or no, if he plays the 1,122 more games to match Rose, how many more multi hit games would he have had? He had 951 in 2,440 games. So we could project that Gwynn may have gotten 200 or maybe 250 more multi-hit games, but he would have fallen short of Pete Rose because I think Rose, 1,225 multi-hit games, that's number one all time. Well, as far as this analysis, what do you think? Is Gwynn greater than Pete Rose? Who would you take? You got to admit that Rose had the durability, 4,256 hits, and he plays in 3,562 games. But I'm just presupposing that if Gwynn could have done the same thing, these are the projected stats that he would have ended up with. And the one that surprised me the most was on the hits per game. Rose was about 1.12 hits per game. Because look at, he played 3,562 games and had 4,256 hits. Gwynn plays 2,440 games and has 3,141. Add another 1,122 games. Gwynn is averaging 1.28 hits per game. So he would have ended up with 4,578. Incredible. And it bears it out because Gwynn has a 338 batting average. Rose, 303. I think the longer Rose played, if he had stopped at 20, his batting average would have been higher, but he kept playing those extra 4 years. And what happened in those extra 4 years? I'll tell you what happened. I'll look at it right now. What happened in the last 4 years for Pete Rose? I'll put his name in right here. See, Rose, he's batting, the early part of his career is 312, 313, 301, 335, and then 348. So he's up there. 316, 304, 307. Then he bats 338, had a 284 one year. Then he does a 317, 323, 311, 302, 331. But then he has a 288, 282. Played a full season and batted 282. Gwynn never did that. See, Gwynn had 19 in a row batting 300. Rose, 325. Then he plays another 1982. He's 41 years old. He bats 272. So you see, or no, 271. So that hurt his average career. Then he had a 245. How did that happen? Well, he's 42 years old. Played 150 games and batted 245. 286. And then toward the end of his career, had a 264. His last year, he played 72 games and batted 219. That's not Pete Rose. See, so toward the end of his career, that hurt his career average. He ended up 303. If he had stopped at age 40, that would have been 18 years. He may have been in the 320s, 325. See, what happened with Tony Gwynn? Look at Tony Gwynn's average. See, he gets going. You know, his first year he batted 289. Just missed out. 11 points. He bats 300 this year. That year, 1982. He goes the next 19 years, bats over 300. If that first year he batted 300, he would have been the only player in Major League history that every year he played baseball, he batted over 300. Did you know that no player has done that? Now, we can say that maybe some guys who played 10 or 11 years and they had 300 every year, but maybe one year they only played 20 games, see their bat. That doesn't count. You got to have a full season. But toward the end of Tony's career, 1990, he's 39 in 1999. He plays 111 games, so he's tapering off. But listen to this. He batted 338 in 111 games. But then 2000, he only played 36 games, 323. And then 2001, he's 41 years old, bats 324. So those last 2 years, he wasn't playing much, but kept the batting average over 300. What am I trying to prove here? Is Tony Gwynn greater than Pete Rose? I don't know. Who would you take? I think I would take Tony Gwynn. No disrespect to Pete Rose, but Tony Gwynn did strike out less. Pete Rose struck out 1,143 times. Gwynn, 434. We can project out that if he plays another 1,122 games, I think he's striking out about every 10 or 11. No, I'd say every 20, maybe 15, 18, or 20 games, Gwynn will have a strikeout. I would say Gwynn probably would get about 80 more strikeouts, so he'd be in the 500. Still, though, Pete Rose was 1,143. See, in baseball, you want a contact hitter. Pete can hit. So I'll go with Gwynn on this one. 338 lifetime batting average, and 19 out of 20 years he bats over 300. Where Rose, 24 years, but he has 16 of them over 300. Rose gets 3 batting titles. Maybe there were better players in his era playing. Gwynn has 8 of them, but yet you got to admit there were good players playing when Gwynn was playing, and he beat them. What do you think on the analysis? I'll take Tony Gwynn. In fact, I saw him play. I live in the San Diego County area, and I've gone to Padre games. I saw Tony Gwynn up close. In fact, I've told this story before. I took my kids to the game. We were in the outfield, and it was photo day. Gwynn came out to left field. We're in the bleachers. And we took a picture. I had my boys stand on the railing, near the railing, and Gwynn is right there, very close. And I snapped a picture. That's how close I was to Tony Gwynn. How about that? And I've seen Pete Rose because I've gone to Las Vegas. He was in the MGM Grand. He had a booth where people could purchase his memorabilia. And I went by, I said, "Hi, Pete." They looked at me. But if you want to talk to him and have a conversation and have to purchase something, I didn't buy anything. Maybe I should have. But I've seen Pete Rose and I've seen Tony Gwynn. Does Pete Rose deserve the Baseball Hall of Fame? Yes, absolutely. If I was a voter, I'd vote him in. I don't care. Look at the stats. Pete Rose. He plays in 3,562 games, has 14,053 at-bats, and gets 4,256 hits. He gets 746 doubles, 3,215 singles, 5,752 total bases, 1,500 walks, He gets 3 World Series titles. You know, one thing Gwynn didn't get, World Series title, didn't get one. He was there twice in the World Series, didn't get it. Pete has 3 rings. I think Pete Rose deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't care. All right, I think I'm done here. That was interesting. I'll see if I can find 2 other players, match them up, and see who's greater. We'll continue the series. Thanks for watching. I'm out.